every file is getting more complicated. There's more involved. There's now like the foreign buyer ban. There's non-resident speculation tax. There's the VUT. We're all often becoming like family lawyers, immigration lawyers, accountants. Like we're
Right.
wearing so many hats now, which, we're merely real estate lawyers, but we need to be aware of all of these other implications that come into a file. We're not seeing any simple files anymore.
You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast with your hosts, Paul Stevenson, David Warren, and Greg Campbell. Let's see what's going on in the world of real estate today.
Well, hello. Do I sound like Paul Stevenson? I'm not Paul Stevenson. Paul Stevenson is away today. I'm Greg Campbell. I'm one of the hosts of the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, along with my co-host, beautiful, lovely David Warren, mortgage agent level 2, owner at Referral Mortgages. We have some special guests on the show today. We have Natalie Guertin and Michelle Poirier from Guertin-Poirier Lawyers, or as it says, Avocat Lawyers. I love how like the bilingualism has to show. You need to know. It's very important in Ottawa to have this. And they are amazing at what they do. I've worked with them and I continue to work with them when we have the opportunity. And so I mean, let's just jump right into it. I know everybody's always excited to hear what we have to say, it seems. Our views are up. People are paying more attention. I will say a lot of our viewers are not subscribers. So if you haven't, do that. Subscribe. Dave, I look at your face. You know how much we love. we love saying hit that bell. Makes me feel like a weirdo, but that's what we're doing, right? We're trying to get more people watching our valuable content. Dave, anything going on in your world that you want to share right now?
I mean, certainly, just a few kind of small topics that we've been seeing. A lot of the banks had their quarterly results come out recently, and TD actually reported a 7% increase in mortgage volume, putting them ahead. And they have $225 billion worth of mortgages coming up for renewal in the next 2 years. That's TD alone. So some interesting numbers coming out of that, which I thought was interesting. Kind of the mix of fixed versus variable rate mortgages. 183 billion worth of fixed mortgages, and 43 billion of variable rate mortgages. So kind of some of those interesting numbers. And I know all the banks are starting to have their quarterly results come out. And I think that'll be as they kind of roll all of the big six roll out of how that mix looks for them, especially as we come into what could potentially be a rate drop in June, but certainly the markets are all pushing or indicating now a July drop is kind of where we're seeing it. But aside from that, I got nothing.
You got nothing. Yeah, no, I was reading about that too. I've got, little updates from the week. The one thing that I was reading about, going back to this whole capital gains thing, I know it seems like we're just going on about that, and we're obviously going to talk about it more because it's such a hot topic. But, I was reading something that apparently this doesn't make sense because Canada thinks the average boomer is the rich. So the average baby boomer in Canada has a household net worth of 1.34 million, placing them in the top quintile of wealth. However, this wealth distribution doesn't align well with the concept of taxing the rich, as many boomers' wealth is tied to mortgage-free home and modest retirement portfolio. BMO study indicates households need 1.7 million for a modest retirement, underscoring the difference in financial needs across age groups. Critics argue that the recent tax policy pitches misleading target boomers by misrepresenting data, underestimating the number of affected households, and distorting the wealth they hold. The policy's portrayal of boomers as rich doesn't consider that many just have enough to avoid state assistance. Former Finance Minister Bill Morneau also criticizes the policy, suggesting it is counterproductive. So that's, this whole thing is just wild. It's just wild. Where is this actually happening, and what is this going to look like in the next the next year, I guess, and how many things are changing behind the scenes? How many people are trying to figure things out quickly to avoid this, and will that be a problem later?
Well, so funny enough, there was an article in the Real Estate magazine talking exactly about that, and I know our guests have some some
Yes.
kind of comments on this as well. But Ontario cottage country has been seeing soaring prices amid the capital gains tax increase. People looking to unload and kind of that active movement. And so they've been seeing a lot, more in the Georgian Bay, Muskoka Lakes, but they've risen by over 11% pricing in those areas. So, obviously people trying to get ahead of that June 25th deadline, but
that's sad, man. Like having to sell your cottage that you could have been in the family, for years, or like anyways, and then it turns into what? Then so you don't have a cottage, then you're just renting. Then it goes back to the whole thing of it seems like almost a forced way to get more people into renting. And who owns all these properties now? Anyways, let's bring the ladies in.
Hello. Morning.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. I didn't get to chat with you guys last time on at the Christmas special.
That's true.
The Christmas
and now Paul's
special.
in here.
yeah.
Yeah. But now
you're scaring them
Paul,
away,
right?
I guess. Between Paul and Greg, you just,
Yeah.
Dave is always there, though.
Yeah. I'm the one constant.
Dave is the constant. So what are you seeing when it comes to this? I know before we got on here, you were mentioning that you're seeing a lot of files, I guess, come across your desk relating to this. So shed some light on what you're seeing as lawyers in the business.
Definitely, yeah. So on top of what you mentioned, what you can see in the market from the MLS listings and the changes in purchase prices and the inventory in terms of cottages being available for sale right now, we're also seeing behind the curtains a lot of parents or grandparents wanting to pass over those secondary homes to their children or grandchildren right away, probably ahead of what they had planned to do with those properties. So we're seeing parents contacting us to do private agreement of purchase and sales or gifting equity in a cottage to their children, all on a rush basis because everyone wants to do it before mid-June. We're seeing more of that, definitely more of that than usual.
From a legal perspective, is there anything that those parents or grandparents are having to keep in mind when looking to gift a property, kind of that living inheritance, if you will?
So capital gains is an obvious one, but they also have to think about like the purchase price. Like if we're gifting the property to their next of kin or to a friend or family member, they might still get taxed at the appraised value of the property, even if they didn't receive any actual sale proceeds from the transaction. That's out of my expertise. I usually refer them to an accountant to verify all those details before we close on the deal. But there's that, and also land transfer tax. Like everyone wants to avoid land transfer tax, so they're all talking about, well, what if we make it appear as a gift, but then we transfer money on the side? Well, no, we can't do that. To be transparent. Yeah. But again, talk to your accountant, and often the beneficiaries, like the transfers of the transaction, the one receiving title, are often first-time home buyers. So that cottage that they inherited from their parents while they were alive becomes their first home. So it uses their first-time home buyer incentives. But at the end of the day, they get a property free and clear of any mortgages. So we're seeing a bit more of that, behind the curtains. Like it's silent, but it's happening for sure.
And is for the land transfer tax and for capital gains, is it based on the, they're on Ontario and the MPAC assessed value or the property tax assessed value, or how is it that determined?
We have a few options. MPAC is a common one because often MPAC, the appraised value through MPAC comes in a bit lower than if you do like a formal appraisal through an appraiser. Another option would have to get a real estate agent to provide a letter of opinion on the value of that property, considering the neighborhood. But yeah, so any appraised value is fine. We can use the MPAC or a letter of opinion or an appraisal, as long as it's close to the actual market value, so that capital gains can be charged appropriately. Otherwise, the parents are on the hook to have to pay capital gains on the actual value of the home, but they never receive the actual sale proceeds.
Got it.
Another risk that I like to explain to especially parents or grandparents gifting their property to their children or grandchildren is the loss of control over your property. If you're putting that property into your child's name, it's your child's property. They could technically kick you out of the property. They could refinance. They could pull the equity. They have control over that property. So it's a big loss of control over that. And then I find it's a huge risk to the parents. So it's not just a simple transfer of title. There's so much involved.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't normally recommend it.
Yeah, I think, and for people that are thinking of doing that, what they also sometimes don't think about is that if they, you mentioned, Michelle, of them not having, and this is their first home, well, when they go to buy a primary residence, they're now needing to factor in property taxes and heating costs for that cottage. So that comes into effect on their qualifying, even if there isn't a mortgage on it. It still does impact their future mortgage qualifying. So it's something
it affects their buying power later on. So there's a lot of risks.
Yeah. That's a great point. So I guess in that case, it's just really kind of discussing with their accountant of what benefits outweigh and that timing, right?
What benefits to the children versus what benefits to the parents? Because everyone is rushing to get rid of their secondary home, cottages, and etc., to avoid the increased capital gains tax implications. But is it to the benefit of anyone? I mean, at the end of the day, we'll see. I guess time will tell.
Mm-hmm.
But we're seeing a lot of that right now.
Yeah, every situation is different for sure. Yeah. Are you seeing, like, that aside, are you seeing a lot of more challenging files lately?
Yes.
Okay. Can you elaborate?
Yes. Even like seeing comments from other real estate lawyers in the province. Everyone's saying, like, I used to be able to do 60 to 80 files a month easy, and now like 30 to 40 is a challenge.
Are you trying to grow your mortgage business? Centum has the tools and support to help you take your business to the next level. Get access to everything from free unlimited custom marketing to daily direct pay. Find out what your business can do with Centum. Learn more at joincentum.ca.
Are you thinking of buying or selling a residential property? Relationships are at the heart of every real estate transaction. At Guertin-Poirier Avocates Lawyers, we love to bring residential buyers, sellers, agents, lenders, mortgage brokers, and the law together to close the deal for you. For an effortless client experience that opens doors, call us at 613-744-4488 or visit our website at guertinpoirierlaw.ca. Let's get to the heart of your deal.
Every file is getting more complicated. There's more involved. There's now like the foreign buyer ban. There's non-resident speculation tax. There's the VUT. We're all often becoming like family lawyers, immigration lawyers, accountants. Like we're wearing so many hats now, which, we're merely real estate lawyers, but we need to be aware of all of these other implications that come into a file. We're not seeing any simple files anymore. We're not seeing those simple TD files. The lender has more and more conditions. It's getting harder and harder to fund a file. So we're finding like working with amazing real estate agents and mortgage brokers is so much more important now because they're actually helping us getting these deals closed. So I'm finding it's getting more complicated, and then our job is getting more complicated because of that.
Yeah, so definitely value added to those partnerships between lawyers and brokers and real estate agents. And unfortunately, I'm finding that we see a little bit more private APSs being done, like people who wants to buy without a real estate agent or a seller who wants to sell without a real estate agent. And they all come to the lawyer saying, well, I don't want to pay the realtor's commission, so I'm going to do without. And then we end up doing a lot of the work that we usually do with real estate agents. And we know how valuable our partners are. Like, I don't know, Natalie, you see a lot of that in.
Well, and I imagine it's difficult for you too, because, what I always say, if someone wants to use a lawyer, I mean, that's fine. That's their prerogative. They can do that. But it's just very numbers based, matter of fact, right? And
there's so much more than that.
There's so much more involved in the process of buying and selling like residential real estate specifically. There's way more to it than that, right?
Absolutely.
And so based on that comment, do you find that a lot of the deals that you're doing for these private deals, are they actually going through? Are they all closing, or are there problems along the ways which is causing problems?
I've had one that just fell through on the date of closing because I recommended my client see an agent for her next house. They came to me to write the agreement. They were buying from their landlord, so they were already living there. and they had already given the deposit in the hands of the vendor.
Mhm.
And normally the deposit is always paid to the vendor's lawyer in trust.
Mm-hmm.
The bank didn't like the APS because it was private, because of the deposit situation. So I had to draft multiple letters to confirm, yes, this is a binding agreement. And a few days before closing, some issues came up. My clients received a letter saying that the landlord was evicting them, even though they were buying the property. So we considered that to be an anticipatory breach, and basically the deposit was to be returned to my clients immediately, but it was in the hands of the vendor. So the chances of that happening are very slim. We have very little control over the situation. So I ended up having to refer them to a litigation lawyer. And this was a young family, first-time buyers. Like, we were heartbroken for them. And
that's terrible.
I feel like it could have been avoided if they had just worked with an agent, and the agent would have told them right away, like, that deposit has to be paid in trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And what to expect, like, along the way. So having like that neutral party in the middle, like the real estate agent, is what avoids a lot of misunderstanding and conflicts down the road. So often if we end up acting on a private transaction, we're not sure that expectations are clear, either on the seller side or the buyer side. So it's a lot to manage on our end without having that.
It also, on any private purchase as well, it automatically triggers an appraisal too, because there's not a professional that's come up with that valuation. And so, on any time there's a non-arm's length sale, purchase or sale, or private sale, it always triggers an appraisal. So, then you fall into, and I find a lot of these purchase agreements, and I have one right now, where there's no condition, it's drafted by their solicitor, but there is no condition of financing. There's no this or that. And it's basically a 3-week close and a firm deal, where I have no idea where this value was derived from. It's just two parties that talk and say, and it's a first-time home buyer. Where are they getting this information from, and where's that seller getting the information from? So it's triggering an appraisal because it is a private purchase and sale. And a lot of people don't think what consequences there can be of that, of an appraisal being needed, because they're going into the property. So if there's anything wrong visually, that can throw that financing off. Value's not there, especially if they have less than 20% down. They don't have the funds to cover any delta if it comes in less than what that purchase price is. So it certainly does open a can of worms. There's nothing wrong, there's certainly nothing wrong with a private purchase or sale, but it's just a matter of getting, having the right information and kind of going in. But a lot of times I find that's not the case. It's kind of the blind leading the blind, I find, a little bit.
And like, at the end of the day, that is a binding agreement. The buyer has to buy, but if the bank doesn't like it, what are their options?
Actually, in the past month, me and Natalie, we each had a client walk into the office with a binding firm private agreement of purchase and sale done privately on a single page, like half a page. Basically, just this person sells that address to that person for X amount, no closing date. Well, actually, no, there was a closing date, but that's basically it. So I'm like,
napkin deal.
In essence, this is a private binding agreement of purchase and sale, but there's a lot of room for pitfalls.
That's crazy.
A lot of risk.
It's funny because the same night that client came in, I think there was a decision at the Supreme Court of Canada regarding a 1-page handwritten agreement in Vancouver. I think it was written in Mandarin for like a $5 million house, no conditions, and the court ruled that it was a binding agreement, and the buyer had to buy.
It's a napkin deal.
It's a napkin deal.
I love that it's a napkin deal for a $5 million house.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hard.
I do appreciate that very much so, though.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you're gonna buy that biggest investment of your life, why cut corners? So
For sure.
Yeah.
I want to go back a bit to what you were saying about, like, more just harder deals. You're doing more work, less because you don't have the capacity and everything is challenging. I have to say, probably since around the end of last year, I guess, Natalie, when we were working on something together, we had a few conversations, but I think that was kind of like the beginning of it for me, where I've never spoken with lawyers more in my career than I have in the last probably 6 to 8 months, just about little things that are coming up. So second part of my first question, I guess, is, are you finding that agents and brokers that you're dealing with, are you fortunate enough to work with a lot of experienced agents and brokers, or are you finding that you're also having to hold hands for, you know, potentially rookies or people that are new to the industry?
We do work with a lot of very experienced and excellent agents, and we're very lucky for that. And same thing for brokers as well. We do work with new agents for sure, but when we do, we like to meet them in person, have a coffee with them, have a conversation with them, tell them that, like, if ever you have any questions, if you're unsure, like, do reach out, because we do like educating agents as well, that we enjoy that. So if ever like they're drafting an agreement and there's a weird clause to be drafted, they'll reach out and we'll help them actually draft the clause to make sure it's written correctly. So that's actually part of what we like about that relationship with the agents. So yes, it is more work for sure, but I think in the long run, we like to be able to help agents and create that long-term relationship with them.
That's great.
More work, yeah, but it's less work for us to prevent complications.
Yeah, of course.
Correct complications. So more work, but less so at the end.
Yeah, initially, but it gets, once it's done, it's understood. That's great.
Is there anything on either the mortgage broker or realtor side that either of you are finding that is causing, like, anything that you've seen as a common theme on both sides, the mortgage broker and the realtor, that is sometimes causing complication or causing things to not go as smoothly? Or is it just more in the dealings of, like you mentioned, Natalie, of, you know, having to decipher whether that person falls under the speculation tax or the foreign buyer ban, or, you know, becoming that immigration lawyer on that side to determine that, or lender conditions? Or is there anything that, you know, on Greg or I's side, let's say, that we're doing?
Is there anything?
That's
what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for other professionals to manage their clients' expectations, to really make sure that they understand. You know, I had a deal a few weeks ago where I was representing a first-time buyer, and the vendor just removed every single chattel in the house, like every fixture. And they're like, well, it's not included in the chattels included. I'm like, it's a fixture. Like, the vendor should understand that if something is nailed into the wall, you can't remove it unless you specifically exclude it. So we were scrambling on the date of closing, trying to get the vendor to reinstall like 30 items.
Wow.
Like, who does that without consulting with their agent, right? Like, the agent should have told the client, like, you can't remove those items, even though they're not specifically included or excluded. That's still, it's from a legal perspective, like, it is inclusion. So don't remove it. So at 4:30, the vendor just like went back to the property and started nailing everything in. And my client was so nervous that it wouldn't be properly done. Like, it wouldn't be structurally sound. Like, there were so many, it was so stressful for the client. So I think just agents really managing, like, explaining to their client what their obligations are.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with you on, there are a lot of I mean, my mother's been in the business for years, right? So I learned, like, I guess it was an old school way, but when we first started doing APSs for inclusions, every deal, and I still do it now, is like all light fixtures as viewed and installed, all window blinds, curtains, curtain rods as viewed and installed. You know what I mean? It kind of makes it clear, but I get tons of APSs that come across, like, that come to me on my listings where that's not in there at all, right? It's just, it's assumed. But I think, you know, to your point, if they should always be in the agreement so that when the seller's looking at it, they understand that that's to be left. I mean, sometimes you'll, you know, even like include all the mirrors, because that's, you know, when I've seen that before, you go in, there's no mirrors in the bathrooms, right? They took the mirrors. But you know, it's not everybody learns the same way and does the same things. Obviously, you got to learn as you go. But that's a very interesting story.
There's out east, in I know in New Brunswick, that the day of closing, the buyers inspect the property with their realtor before the deal closes.
Yeah.
Oh, the day of.
Really? The day of, you invest, you do a walkthrough. You basically ensure that it's in broom swept condition, that things are there that are supposed to be, and then it closes. Which I think is an interesting
we do the
process.
walkthroughs like anywhere up to a week before. I try to get them a couple days ahead of time, but it's true. A lot of agents don't do it. I've always done those. Everything usually works out great, other than sometimes there's a little bit of a mess left that you have to come to the rescue, call your junk removal guy. get them out.
A lot of clients coming in from other provinces, probably the east, it's like they have a final walkthrough on the date of closing. It's not even specified in the agreement. It's a right. So they come here and they're like, when's my final walkthrough? I'm like, you've already used up your visits. You don't have anything else.
Yeah.
But for us, like from a closing date perspective, like for me, when I have a closing, my priority, like I came in early this morning to get my deal out before 9, before we were starting the podcast, because like that's my number one priority on the date of closing is just getting that money out as soon as I can. I want my clients to get their keys as early as possible. But if I'm waiting on a final walkthrough and they're done at 1 p.m., that puts a lot of delays on wiring and getting things registered. So I personally prefer that the clients do it like 2-3 days before.
Yeah. That's wild. So is that all the Maritimes, Dave? Or is
I know it's New Brunswick. I don't know about Nova Scotia.
New Brunswick. So it's a right. Correct. I like that. But I appreciate the delay in what could happen. Yeah. There could be big problems if it's right on the day.
I think they're a little more easygoing out there. If it closes a day late, it's just like, whatever.
It's all good. Brunswick.
A little,
yeah. Do you think, Michelle, you're back there?
Yeah.
I have a question about status certificates. Just as kind of like a more personal question, I guess. Curious.
Greg's got a deal a listing, and he's got a.
No, it's very basic. It's just like something I'm curious about. Because whenever I'm in the middle of a transaction, if I'm buying, we order the status. I personally pay the $200. I ordered it on a rush right away. Like I just deal with it because I don't want any delays. I want it to be done as quickly as any other conditions that are happening, right? And I've been doing that for years, and it's always worked out very well. And the buyers are very receptive to it because I'm going, above and beyond what some others would do. Do you find that has that changed over the years? Are more realtors ordering statuses, and are statuses getting ordered on rush more frequently? Or are you still finding that most lawyers are requesting the status certificates?
That's a good question for Marianne here, but who's our administrator. For her, like that's okay. If she gets an APS in and she sees it's a condo, she'll order it immediately. Of course, if she'll always check if the agent has already ordered it, but that's like her top priority if she gets a condo in, and she'll count the days. If it's less than 10 days, she'll call the client. Are you okay with paying $200 for a rush? Yes. Okay. So then she'll get it quicker.
Okay.
But I would say it's mostly Marianne who does it. Not a lot of agents do it.
I agree, because I usually check with Marianne to make sure like who ordered the status certificate. If it's us or my agent, I have no concern. But if the status certificate comes from the other agent, then we have a few extra precautions to take. So I ask her every time, and I do see like main tendency that our office orders the status certificate. For Greg, you might still be the exception to the rule.
Is it when you get a status from the sellers and you're representing the buyers, are you able to accept that, or is there a period of time that you're able to accept it? Kind of similar to what Greg was mentioning.
We put a big disclaimer at the top of our review. So we will review the status certificate with the clients, then we'll send them a summary of the review by email. And we will say in the email, like, if this status certificate was obtained through the seller's lawyer, you will not have any recourse against the corporation for any omissions or errors in the documentation, because only the person who requests the copy of the documentation can
Interesting.
basically sue the condo corporation for any errors or omissions in the documentation.
And same thing, it's only the person who ordered it who can then ask questions about it. So when we're doing our review and the client asks, well, can you specify which parking space is owned or assigned? It's very hard for me to then contact the condo board because they'll say, well, you didn't pay for it, so we can't answer your questions.
Right.
So I think you have the right approach, Greg. I like your approach. It's great when we can have a status certificate like already available with the agreement of purchase and sale. That's amazing. It speeds up things, but that's not what we're doing at the time.
Well, it makes me feel good about myself.
I guess in a case like that, you're able to, at least even if you're having to order it on your side, even after having a copy from the sellers, you can kind of get that head start of that review, and then kind of when you get it from the condo board, be able to kind of speed read it.
Yeah, and I mean, when the market was crazy, we always ordered them ahead of time, right? Just so that it would be prepared to get an unconditional offer. But now it's like I haven't ordered one for the sellers in quite a while. And, you know,
Those were different times. There were risks,
totally different times.
risks everywhere. So that was just one of the additional risks that people were willing to take.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would even do like pre-reviews for clients wanting to put in offers. So like the vendor would only accept an offer on a certain date. So we would review the status before the buyer would put in their offer. So that way they could put in that unconditional offer. That's also something that we've been doing. And I've done it a few times this year. So it's starting again. I feel like there's a second wave coming.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen if this. I mean, and you know, we talk about it at length, obviously. Me, Dave, and Paul, where you know this idea that this rate drop is just going to save lives or something of like a 0.25 drop on variable rates, which are, anyways. I don't want to get into this too much, but people are going to come out and start shopping again, which is going to drive the price up, which is not going to, have any effect on their payment. It's just going to be more than what it would have been if they bought now in a fixed. It's just this weird misconception. But I mean, if you guys are you're seeing that it's a more balanced market, I guess, on your end as well. But are you seeing more activity in general?
We had a big wave in end of March, beginning of April, with new files coming in for the summer. And I feel like it's picking up again.
There was a bit of a drop, right, in mid-April till till mid-May, kind of. I found it kind of
balanced out, but now I feel like it's picking up again, and I think it's an anticipation of that rate drop.
So from what both of you, from a sentiment standpoint, you feel that things are picking up, that kind of the same mindset as us, that any sort of positive news in the headlines about rates or anything like that it will kind of put fuel on the fire.
Like a later start to the spring market, like almost like a late spring. But we're expecting a busy summer. Like our numbers are already looking really good for July and August, and it feels a bit more normal. Agreements are coming in with conditions and not too much bidding wars. Like we see a few clients who had to bid on a few properties to get the one, but less so than in the past 3 years. And also we're seeing more first-time home buyers. So they're finally back in the market, able to compete with everyone else for this inventory that's still a bit low. But no, I'm hopeful for this year. I think we're going to feel a bit more like we're back in the 2018, 2019 pre-pandemic numbers.
Okay. Well, it's interesting to get your your take as solicitors on that, just because, people always criticize us of that we're pushing it or anything like that, or it's just our opinion. So kind of hearing from your side, where you're seeing those purchase agreements coming in or sale agreements coming in and seeing that uptick, and kind of that same wave that we talk about of, some months and some couple of weeks have been picked up and then falls right off. So it's nice to know that it's not just Greg and I, No,
I mean, consider our first-time home buyers, when they come to us, they're almost to the finish line, right? They're about to sign the final paperwork, their mortgage is in place, like everything is just about to get finalized. And they don't look as traumatized as the past 2 years, It's like, okay, well, what's the process for you to buy your first home? Oh, well, we had to put bids on 2-3 houses, but this was the one, and we got our asking price, and, we didn't hear that 2-3 years ago. It was way more traumatic. So I think
they're coming in with the frazzled hair, like they just went through war.
I can hear the headline, like, can I get the house now? Like, am I gonna see that key someday?
It's interesting because I find that most of the clients that I worked with in the last few years, I talk to them every once in a while, and they're just like, yeah, man, we're not moving ever.
I want to do that,
but we're staying. We're not doing that again. Whether it is the same scenario or not, but interesting.
I think it's part of the top 3 most stressful events in someone's life.
For sure.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. Not just the anxiety of the purchase and the financing of it, but then just the emotional toll of moving, period.
The physical toll, like
effects
on your children, your pets, like it's huge.
And I think, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because it all goes back to what you were mentioning at the outset of the episode, is working with people that have gone through it and professionals, as opposed to trying to go at it yourself. First time home buyers, especially, trying to do a private purchase or sale without knowing what's going on or what that process looks like or how things are supposed to be handled. You know, I find when I speak to those individuals that are looking for financing, they are completely lost. And it's, I kind of wonder, how did you even get to this point of thinking that this was going to be a wise decision of not seeking any sort of professional advice leading up to coming with this like firm purchase agreement. But anyways, I digress.
All
right.
We're seeing a lot of pre-sales, a lot of people buying from builders again. So people, we were thinking that we were wondering if the purchase price of new constructions was going to drop a little bit due to everything that happened the past 2-3 years regarding like delays and carrying on all the delays in construction and people getting their keys like months, sometimes years later than expected, and the changes in purchase price. But people are not, they didn't get scared off by all that happened. They're still buying from builders.
But to get to your point from last week's episode, David, with the development levies, so I reviewed a few builder APSs last week. And I always request a development levy cap from the builder before firming up. And I did for a specific transaction last week. And this morning I got an email from the client, like, I just read this article that development levies are going up 11%. Like, what does that mean for my purchase? I'm like, don't worry, that's what we worked with. We did last week. We got a cap, like everything's good. So I think people are going to be more and more aware of that. And even though we always request the cap, it's extremely rare that the builder would charge it back to the purchaser. I think it happened like once or twice, and I was able to have it waived on closing. But with those increases coming in, like that's a huge fee added on the purchase price. So I think builders are going to be increasing their purchase prices in the next 2 years. So it's really important to have that cap right away.
Maybe you can explain what you mean by a cap.
So if you don't have a cap on it, it means that they could charge up to 11% or whatever it costs the builder to bring those services to the property. If I ask for a cap, depending on the type of property, usually for a condo it's 1,000, so max 1,000 added to the purchase price. If it's a townhome, it's around 3,000, and a single, it's around 6,000.
And so this is an over and above. They've agreed to a price of 500,000. The builder has the discretion within the purchase agreement to increase that purchase price if there's undue expenses or kind of in this case, a levy that arises that they weren't factoring in.
Yes. So in the agreement, it states that the builder has that discretion. It's extremely rare, as I was mentioning, that they do charge it. But I have seen it in the past on smaller builders. But with those huge increases coming up, there's probably more and more of a risk of them charging it back to the client. So a cap is extremely important, and we have that like set into the agreement before they even firm up. So that way, if they do charge it to the buyer, there's going to be a cap at like between 1,000 and 6,000 per deal.
Is a cap typically in a builder purchase agreement, or is it left out and needs to be added? It has to be
asked for by the lawyer.
Interesting.
Otherwise, it's whatever the municipality charges.
Yeah. So in this case,
up to 11%.
Of that.
Yeah, like
wow.
Sorry, I just totally forgot about this. But as you're saying this, I remember when I sold a bunch of like 7 units at Mattamy a number of years ago. This conversation happened, and we had something in play saying that if this comes up, the buyer will be responsible for up to this amount.
Exactly.
And that amount. And I totally forgot that was, that was, because I remember it was like, what is this? What is this development fee? Like all this new tax or new levy, and we ended up not having to pay anything. It didn't happen, but we signed an additional agreement saying that it might happen.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like in my career, I might have seen one development levy once on hundreds and hundreds of transactions. So usually the builder will carry the cost over to the next home purchase. Like they will just make their next house a bit more expensive. So it's part of the inflation, basically. But
we also haven't seen a double-digit increase in development charges like we're about to see either. It's been quite a long time since that, so it's probably never, they'd rather eat that $1,000 or couple $1,000 increase than have a bad reputation for
Exactly.
amending their purchase agreements later. But when they're
Exactly.
facing a significant increase, upwards of $12,000, it's a little bit different, probably. Oh, that's great.
But they
That's
always have
good
to think
information.
about the reputation, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of builders in Ottawa. So if someone hears that this builder charged $6,000 on closing and the buyer didn't know, that they're not going to go see that builder for house. So.
Yeah, they don't want to end up in the papers for that.
Well, yeah, the paper is going to find out pretty quick. The media will get a hold of that and run.
Withholding your reputation, but also getting the deal to close, because not every home buyer has an extra $6,000 to spend.
Exactly. My client a few months ago, he got hit with a $6,000 development levy on closing. He found out 2 days before. He's a first-time buyer. He's like, I simply don't have the funds to pay for that. So we went back to the builder. We said, we're not paying this, and they ended up waiving it. But legally, they had a right to charge it.
Right.
My client signed that agreement. It never had it reviewed. I got the APS in January, was signed like a year before, so we didn't have it capped. So
yeah, and I guess in a case like that as
your
well,
agreement's reviewed.
Yeah, for first-time home buyer though, they could be, their financing could be at the top of their ratios. If it's an insured mortgage, there's a certain, they can't go over that 44 TDS or 39 GDS, and they're capped. So they have to come up out of pocket with it. And if they only had, the minimum down anyways, yeah. No, that's really good advice. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and that's either, a good refresher for me. I completely forgot that I've been through that before. I'm gonna let our new build home specialist Venkat. I'm gonna let him know that this is valuable information that he should be talking to all potential buyers about.
For sure, and it's usually done like through the lawyers. So definitely ask them to have their agreements reviewed by a lawyer. We don't even charge for it. We'll just do a review with the client. We'll ask for the cap, and then we'll talk to them again like 2 years after for their closing. But it's always a good idea to have that set up during the conditional period.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
we have no mood boost because we're not Paul Stevenson. So
I'm looking forward to that.
I'll tell you a quick story though. I'll tell you a quick story. So last week, Dave knows a bit about this. I got invited onto a TV show. It's the premise is you meet somebody you don't know, and then you get invited to participate in what they do as their career, and then they jump into your shoes for a day. So I met with this girl, and she gave her like a quick lesson on showing homes, and we set it up. We had a showing. So that was fun, but she was a stand-up comic. So I had 4 hours to write a comedy bit and perform at Absolute Comedy for a small crowd of people. And it was really fun. I was put on the spot. I've always thought about doing stand-up, and I ended up doing a real estate bit. So it was like a 7-minute story, 7-minute, bit about one of my clients and the way that they operate. And we've done multiple deals together. So I had my notes in my phone. I actually wrote it out, but it was great. So that's it's not a mood boost, but it's comedy related.
Yeah.
So,
our job is often so ridiculous that it's funny.
So now that I've done this, I'm like, okay, well, I want to do this again. Now in my mind, I'm thinking I could have like a full 30-minute skit on real estate and shit that happens. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's my next thing. I don't know.
Yeah, you'd have a lot of material.
Well, that's right.
Now, did you get any laughs? That's the question.
I did.
Or did you bomb? Did you think you were good in your head? And it was just
I did get laughs because I had this punchline and I just kept repeating it. And by the end of it, I said my last line and I said, "What is it?" And I put the mic to the crowd, and then they all say it and they laugh, and I get off stage and hugs, and
It helps that you're a performer at heart. So
well, it does, and I was happy that my friend who brought me into the show, understood that element. He's like, dude, I can only bring in people who are outgoing into this TV series because if you're not, the show's just gonna fail and be very uncomfortable. So everybody has to be pretty much outgoing to get involved in just jumping into someone else's life for a day.
Oh.
Well, you should drop the link to that video if it exists.
Well, once I get it, I mean, I think it's coming out on Bell TV in the fall, so we're not going to see it until then, but I'll be sharing it. But I'll also be sending out invites to an open mic night at some point.
Yes, with a little bit more notice than
yes, that's right.
Than the 30-minute text. Are you around Preston?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was it. I did have a few friends come, but most people couldn't make it short notice. Anyways, digress. Back into thanks. Giving thanks to our special guests and our sponsors. Natalie Guertin and Michelle Poirier. Guertin-Poirier Avocates, lawyers. Yes. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for coming
Ladies,
on.
It was wonderful, and I think it'll be very informative for our listeners.
Our pleasure, and thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll do it again. All right.
Till
That's
next
it, guys. Have a great day. David, love you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe because we'd really like that.